it's Sonia here with The Widow Life, where I usually post videos about being a widow. And in case you haven't guessed, I am a widow. I've been a widow for almost 2.5 years. My husband passed away in 2021. And I decided to start this channel to share about being a widow, not only to fellow widows, but widowers. I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about widows, especially in the United States. We don't handle grief very well, or loss or death at all, and I don't feel like it's talked about enough. So I just thought this channel could be a way of talking about it and just kind of, taking the lid off and seeing what it's really like to be a widow. And a lot of times we aren't who you think we are. A lot of people think of a widow as someone being, in their senior years, and that's not always the case. Of course, there are certainly some out there like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to say that that's a negative thing, but a lot of times there are people that are like me. I'm not super young, but I'm not necessarily in the senior years yet. I'm in my 50s, 51. So, my husband died when I was 48, and then there are some of us who are a lot younger, and we often feel like we're kind of left out in the cold. And this can also apply to widowers. It's not just widows. Widowers often face some similar challenges as us widows. So I just thought I would share about that. So today's topic that I thought I would talk about is double the load. So what I mean by that is, after you become a widow or a widower, I'm sure you'll find, and I have found this for myself, that some things I just feel like it's just been doubled. And so, for instance, I suddenly became a single parent. Now, there are people out there that have been single parents for years, and they're used to that. And yes, their load is doubled because, they have to be father and mother. But for someone, that wasn't the case. Like, I was married for 27 years, and my oldest child was 19 when he passed away. And so, we were a team, and we did the child rearing together. And then all of a sudden he was gone, and I had a 19-year-old, and my son was a senior in high school, and he was learning how to drive. And then I had one in middle school, and trying to juggle all that. And I'm sure it's even much harder if you have little ones, toddlers or babies or elementary years, whatever stage of life you're in. Suddenly that parenting is now been doubled because you have to try to fulfill both roles. And if you're not used to doing that, it can be really, really hard. And also, how I feel like the load is doubled too, which would be slightly different from a single parent that's used to being a single parent, is you're also dealing with the grief on top of that. So not only you're suddenly the single parent, and then you're dealing with the grief. And grief can really be a weight on your shoulders. It can just really be a burden that or like to me, I always felt like it was like an anchor. Like I always had this anchor of grief that's dragging behind me as I'm trying to accomplish tasks during the day. And it can really, really be hard. And when you're dealing with grief, especially if it's something that was unexpected, like myself, like my husband was sick, but he was expected to get better. I mean, him dying was never on the table at all. So all of a sudden, of course, everybody's going to die eventually, but he was 53 when he died, and he had similar episodes of, I'll probably have a video in the future talking about how he died, like more in detail, but he was a type 2 diabetic. He got an infection, and he had them before, and he recovered fine. And so this was kind of something similar. It was a little bit worse than previous infections, but he pulled through those other ones, and they were fully expecting him to make a complete recovery from this particular infection. And then all of a sudden things went completely sideways, and then he just died. And, it was like we're calling 911 and the ambulance is here, and he's like whisked off to the hospital. I couldn't go with because we were still in COVID times. They wouldn't let me go. And then I get a call less than about 45 minutes later. The hospital was about 20 minutes from where we lived, and then I get to the hospital. They didn't tell me anything over the phone. I get there, and then they just tell me that he died. And I was like, what? It was just out of the blue, really. So, dealing with that, and so, it's been challenging. Like, I feel like my life has become double the load, and it's, a lot of little things with the kids, things with, just like he died in the winter time. It was in March, so we were still kind of in winter. Then all of a sudden spring comes, and we're in April, and what happens in April? Your grass starts to grow. Well, my husband, he mowed the lawn, and we have almost an acre of ground, and he would mow the lawn and I would do the flower beds. We kind of work together with the yard work. All of a sudden, like, it's falling on me. My kids can help a little bit, but my husband, he was very territorial about his lawnmower, so nobody rode that mower but him. So now all of a sudden, I have to figure out how to use this mower and also take care of the flower beds, take care of the lawn. I had never mowed our lawn before. We had only lived in the house that we're currently in now. At the time, we had only lived there a year and a half. So I still was kind of figuring out things, within, like, how to take care of things within the house, just regarding flower beds, not let alone a yard. And our yard isn't a normal yard. It's not flat. We have some hills, and so, it can be a little scary. So that was, I felt like my load was doubled, especially with that. And also, the lawnmower was in pieces because the last time he mowed, something broke in the mower, and we literally had to push it into the garage. And he was very, very handy with that kind of stuff. He could fix cars and mowers and, just a really handy guy. And this would have been November of 2020, I think it happened. It was like the last mow of the season. Something breaks on the mower. Like, we had to push it in the garage. And he's like, oh, I can fix this. It's not a big deal. He actually took apart what needed to be fixed. He ordered the part, and he had to wait a couple weeks because, again, this was during COVID, and, everything was so, like, crazy and wild during that time. And so then by the time the part came in, we were in winter, and it was cold, and the garage was really cold. And so he was like, you know what, I don't feel like fixing the mower right now in a really cold garage. We're not going to be mowing the lawn for a bit. I'll fix it in the spring, And I'm like, yeah, like, we don't need it right now, just let it wait till spring. It'll be fine. Well, then he passes away. So then the grass is growing. I have a mower that's in pieces. So, like, that was more double the load because suddenly I needed to get my grass mowed, and I needed to find somebody that could put my mower back together. Well, I am fortunate. I'm very blessed. I do have family and friends that are handy, but I didn't grow up where I live now, so a lot of them are like 2 hours away. So my brother-in-law, who was a mechanic, was like, no problem. I'll come fix your mower, because we had all the parts that we needed to fix it. They just needed to be put on the mower. And I know some people are like, just Google it, just YouTube it. I'm like, okay, some things I can do that, but I've never done anything, with motors or anything like that. And I just didn't want to try it for my first time on an expensive machine. I was like, no, I'm kind of small. Like, this is a big mower. I'm like, no, I can't, no. Like, that's a little bit above my pay grade. I can't do that. So I had to find somebody. And so fortunately, my brother-in-law was going to help me. Well, then he gets sick with COVID, and not only was he sick. He got that Delta version, which was like the really bad one where people were like really sick. So he was out. He was sick for like 3 weeks. There was no way. I'm like, dude, you stay. I didn't want it, and B, he just needed time to get better. His health. I was more concerned about his health than my stupid mower, but I needed to get it fixed. So trying to find somebody to fix it, I finally was able to find someone at my church, and that was just like another thing. It was just adding to things that I already normally did before he died. Now all of a sudden I have to worry about how am I going to get this mower fixed? And it's just little things like that. And then you're dealing with grief because it was hard, because I kept thinking he could have fixed this and now he's not here. It was a constant reminder that he wasn't here. So I'm sure some of you can relate to, how I feel, when I'm, sharing about doubling the load, and it can be things that you just wouldn't really think about before. Like maybe, I know, like there's a family member that I know that their significant other died, and that significant other always did the finances. And they were aware of the finances, but that significant other did, the paying of the bills and the banking and all that. And, they kind of knew a little bit about it, but suddenly they had to take all that on. And they were just sort of like, how do I do this? And, that was very stressful. That just doubled their load. It could be like, I know for a lot of widowers, not to say that all men don't cook, that's not true, but in a lot of households, the wife is the one that does, most of the cooking and taking care of the home and buying the groceries and all that stuff. And now suddenly she's gone, and now they're faced with, oh my goodness, what do I do in the kitchen? Like, I went to Grief Share, which I do recommend if you're really struggling in your grief journey. Grief Share is a group. They usually meet in churches. You do not have to be affiliated with a church. You don't have to be a Christian or religious by any means to go. It's just a very helpful group to kind of help you navigate through the grief journey. To, a lot of times when you're grieving, you don't know, am I normal? Am I not normal? Do I need to see a therapist? Am I going crazy? Because you often feel all of those things. And Grief Share can really help you sort some of that stuff out and be like, okay, I am normal. Or it might show you like, I'm really struggling, and maybe I do need to seek out some extra help, and that's okay too. So that was just a little, I am not affiliated with Grief Share by any means, but I have gone, and it has helped me a lot in my journey. So there were some gentlemen in our group that, that was what they were facing. Their wives died, and now suddenly, they're like, I have to feed myself. And a lot of them, of course, were doing takeout or whatever. And, that's okay at first, but you get tired of it. So, they're literally learning how to make food in the kitchen. So, that could be how their load is doubled. Or, there's so many different ways that your load can be doubled. And then you tie that in with the grief, like let's say, you're now faced with the cooking. You never cooked before, and your wife or husband was an amazing cook, and now you're in that kitchen, and then you see their favorite pot or whatever, and it just sets you off, and it just sets you into a tailspin. And then you're like, okay, I never want to step foot in my kitchen again. It's like all of these things that it gets really kind of complicated sometimes. And I just wanted to share that with you, because I'm sure some of you are going through that, and you're probably like, what's wrong with me? I should be doing better than I am, or it's just a pot. Or for me, like, it could be something, my husband loved tools, so I might see like a hammer, and it just makes me really sad. And I'm like, it's just a hammer. I shouldn't be dumb. Or like one thing that kind of got me a little, as I'm in 2.5 years, so the grief it's always there. Like, I just want to say that, like, always going to carry that loss with me, but it's not as sharp as it was. But sometimes there's just things that just kind of like, like get you. So like one of them, and this is weird, but I saw a vehicle that was the color of my husband's vehicle, and he was really great at driving, and he always liked to back in. I'm terrible at backing in. I'm just like, we're not doing that. No, it's too stressful for me. I'm not doing it. So I just saw this white car that was backed into its space, and it got me all like, he would have done that, and it just kind of triggered me a little bit. So, so when I mean by doubling the load, like some of those triggers can then make things extra hard for you, and you might feel like just getting through the day is so much harder, or tasks that you normally would do fine now suddenly seem doubly harder. And those things are really normal. Like just getting out of bed sometimes can be doubly harder. Like you might be normally like that get up and go person, getting, I can't wait to start the day. And now that you are dealing with this loss, you just don't want to get out of bed. And that's okay. Don't feel like you have to do it all, especially in the beginning. I would say pace yourself, set like one goal. If you feel like you're so overwhelmed with things, ask for help if you have people in your life that are willing to help. Sometimes, people will tell you, well, whenever you need me, or just let me know and I'll be there, or, all those little catchphrases that people say, and take them up on it. I've done that, and that's been very humbling for me. I do feel like in our country, especially, we're do-it-ourselfers. We need to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. But when you suffer something like the death of a spouse, sometimes you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Like you're just like down and out, and you need help because your load has been doubled, tripled, quadrupled, that there's just no way that you can get out of that yourself. So that's okay, and ask for help. And that's something that I'm still learning 2.5 years in, is asking for help, because I do like to be independent, but there's just things that he did that I can't do, and that I don't have the skill set to do. It's just out of my skill set, and that's okay. And if somebody is giving you a hard time about it, as I say, move on, forget them, go to somebody else. Some people just don't understand, they don't get it, or they'll be like, well, it's been 2 years, and, why is this still really hard for you? Well, chances are the person that says that hasn't suffered a loss like you did. And if they did, well, great for them, that, they're just, they've moved on and they're doing great. But you're not them, and if you haven't, that's okay. I wouldn't take too much stock in people like that. But yeah, try to find somebody that can help you, and just realize that, some things just might be doubly harder. It might take you longer to do something, and if it's too stressful, don't do it right now. Like if I would say, if you can avoid, if something's really stressing you out and you can avoid it, don't do it. I mean, there's certain stressors that you can't avoid. Like bill paying, you can't avoid those. Those bills got to get paid. If you have children and your children are really stressing you out, you still got to take care of them. Sorry, you still got to do it. But if there's other things that are really stressing you out, like certain family members that whenever you see them, it's just like a mess. If you need to just set some boundaries for a little bit, that's okay. Or certain people in your life that you used to spend, like friends or whatever, and they're adding to your stress, maybe it's time to let that friendship kind of rest for a little bit and seek somebody else. Because some people, they're just not going to understand. And, well, I mean, I would say most people aren't going to understand, but some people, they don't understand, but they say they understand. and that's frustrating. But if you have a friend that says, you know what, I don't understand, but I'm still here for you and I still love you and I still want to support you, then that's somebody that you want to keep in your inner circle. So I'm not sure where. I feel like this video has kind of gone all over the place about talking about the load being doubled, but I just wanted to share that, you know, if you're going through that, if that's how you're feeling right now, you're not alone. I felt that way. I still feel that way. You know, I'm really fortunate. I love my house, and I like taking care of my house. You know, I can mow the lawn now, no problem. I know that lawn, like I've got it all mapped out of how I mow safely on those hills, the whole 9 yards. But it's a lot. It's a lot, and you know, and it can be very stressful. And I just feel like some tasks it just takes forever, or I just feel like it takes me a while to get to the point where I can actually do that task, because there's so much of that grief wrapped up into that. And it's sort of like mind over matter, where you really just don't feel like doing it, and you literally have to force yourself to do it because you feel like the weight of grief is just pressing you down, and you're like, okay, I know I need to make dinner, but it's so hard to just get up off that chair and start doing it. And maybe you haven't struggled with those things, but I know that I have, and I just want to share that, you know, if you have, that's okay. Give yourself a break. Try and focus on the positives. Like, if you can get one thing done in the day, consider that a win. Don't think about all those things that you haven't accomplished. Try to focus on the things that you have accomplished. And that'll just help you, you know, a positive mindset can really help you, you know, out. If you're constantly thinking negative, that can really be draining, and you're already drained because you're dealing with your grief. And then you can build on that, you know, if, like, let's say you got your kitchen cleaned one day, but your dining room is still a mess. Be like, okay, I got my kitchen cleaned, and then next time I need to clean my kitchen, maybe I will just clear the table in the dining room, or vacuum half the room, or whatever, and just kind of build off of that. I find that that's been a little bit easier, helping to ease the load. I feel like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, which can also double our load, because we're like, we should be doing better than we are, and or why are we feeling like this, or why is this so hard? It didn't used to be so hard. And so sometimes I think we double the load on ourselves, and we don't need to. So as I say, cut yourself a break and realize that you're not alone, and try to seek help. So I'm just going to end this video here. I hope that this was encouraging for some of you out there that are struggling. And I'm really sorry that you are in this widow or widowhood journey. You know, it's not something that we ever thought. I mean, of course it's going to happen to all of us if we get married, but you don't really want to think that it's going to happen to you, but it does happen to all of us, and sometimes it happens to us sooner than we would like, and it can be really hard to navigate. I just want to say that I understand your struggles that you're going through, and as I always say, be the best you that you can be. And I will see you next time. Bye!